Welcome to the Genealogy Gems podcast. It's a show filled with family history, research, strategies and techniques, news and entertainment, and inspiration. And I'm your host, Louise Cooke. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 232. Gosh, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? 232 episodes. Well, it's August of 2019, and it's been, 12 years? So I guess that makes sense. We got up to 232, and that's only this show. There is still the Family Tree Magazine podcast out there. Now, some of you may have wondered, what happened to that show? Well, Family Tree Magazine, their parent company, F&W Media, they went into bankruptcy this year. I know, it's unfortunate. And Family Tree Magazine was kind of a victim along the way because they are one of many magazines owned by F&W. And they weren't having trouble, but other magazines were having trouble. So the bottom line is they went through bankruptcy. They were purchased in auction by Yankee Publishing. And you might be familiar with Yankee Publishing. I think they do a Handyman magazine and a Yankee magazine. So they're based in New England. They've picked up Family Tree Magazine, and we're really happy to see that. The podcast, in the meantime, went on hiatus. So I don't know, actually, between me and you, I don't know if and when it will start back up. I hope it does, but we'll see what the new publishers think, if that's something that they want to continue. But there are hundreds of episodes there. My goodness, we did that show for over 10 years. At the same time as doing Genealogy Gems, and for a while there, the Family History Podcast. That's a lot of podcasting. My goodness. But it's been so much fun. And guess what? I have not yet run out of something to say. So with that in mind, today, we're going to explore the pitfalls of shallow research and what you can do to go deeper in your genealogy research to really ensure that you have an accurate family tree. Professional genealogist Elissa Scalise Powell is here, and she's going to be talking with me about that. And while speaking at the Genealogy Show conference in Birmingham, England in June of this year, I got a chance to sit down for the first time with Irish genealogy podcaster Lorna Moloney. She's a professional genealogist with Merriman Research. And Lorna is a delight, my friends, and you're going to really enjoy her. She's got a lot of great stuff to say about your Irish ancestors. So we're going to be having a lot of fun today. We're going to be learning a lot. But of course, before we do all of that, we need to hear from you. So let's head over to the mailbox. Now, Steve wrote in, he says, I came across a new site that you might like to inform your listeners about. It's very new and just getting started, so I know that they would appreciate a mention. The name of the new site is German Letters in Letters. It's germanletters.org. And what they are trying to do is to collect letters written between German immigrants to the U.S. and their relatives back home in Germany. Now, you can very easily submit scanned copies of any letters that you have, and the really neat thing is that they will post them at their website. And once they post them, they are asking for translations by any volunteers. So this is an excellent way to have any letters in your possession to be translated for free. Steve says, I was given about 30 letters written to my great-great-grandfather, Johann Bernhard Husum, who immigrated to Adams County, Illinois, about 1855. They are from his siblings, nieces, and a nephew back in Germany. They range from 1866 to the early 1900s. Oh my gosh, Steve, how lucky you are to have that collection. The Johann Bernhard Husum collection can be viewed at the site. Well, that sounds very cool. It looks like it's just getting up and running, but it's germanletters.org. And Steve, thank you so much for the tip. Now, Anne wrote me, again, this spring. I'm a little behind on emails, but you guys know I read every single one of them. And I reply to many of you personally. Sometimes I hang on to them because I want to share them here in an episode, as I am with Anne's. She says, Hi, Lisa. I'd love to say that your podcast has helped me with the genealogy brick wall at this point, but I'm only a drop-in genealogist. Figuring that I'm the only one in the family interested at this time. Working on one grandson, though, because I think he'd be a real asset in finding and preserving family stories. I do research in fits and starts, but I do love your podcasts. I'm catching up on back episodes now and recently listened to one that started with you describing a granddaughter's first Christmas coming up. Oh, I remember that. She says, it reminded me of one of the best things about your podcast. It's like you're sitting in my living room with me, having a cup of tea, discussing your stories and tips and tricks to help with mine. Thank you so much for all the information and for your casual, personal, yet professional style. And thank you so much. Yes. Oh my gosh. Miss Emily turned 2. Can you believe that? I can't believe it. In fact, today we are having a birthday party for my middle grandchild, Joey. He's turning 7. Many of you who've listened for a while know that, remember when Joey was born? And that's what I love too about podcasting. I like to be able to sit and visit with you when I share my stories that you're thinking about yours, and many of you write and share with me what's going on in your life. And I do appreciate that. I always enjoy hearing from you. I did get one email one time from a cranky pants. Yep. Can you believe it? There was a cranky pants amongst us. And he thought that was very boring and wanted me to stop that. But I'm not going to. Sorry. I'm a mom. I'm a grandma first. First and foremost, right? All of us have family. And we have our everyday lives, and we're all friends. So I like being able to share that here on the show. Thank you so much for writing, Anne. And this idea of being a drop-in genealogist, and you said that you, what did you say here? I do research in fits and starts. I am so okay with that. Now, sometimes, when you're on Facebook and you're seeing all these genealogy groups, and there's just all these super rigid, hard and fast rules, and you're not serious if you're not doing it all the time. Forget that. Many of us are drop-in genealogists. Why? Because we have a full-time life, right? And I love doing family history. And of course, I can spend hours and hours doing it. But doing it in short amounts is not a bad thing. I think that it's wonderful that people today have the ability to do that. If you've been researching for a while, you know how hard it was to try and just pick something up, dabble with it, and put it down when you had a few minutes. Doing family history research, it took hours, and you had to write letters, right? And you had to wait for the letters to come back, and you had to go all the time in person because there was nothing online. So, a lot has changed. We still do all of those things, of course, but I think what the online genealogy resources have done for us is it's brought everybody else, or at least given everybody else, a chance to join in. Because some folks, and I know you're out there, some of you are soccer moms. You're in the car and you're waiting for the kids and you got a few minutes on your phone. Or, you're somebody who's at work and this is your lunch hour. So we sit down together and you listen to the podcast and you do some family history dabbling during your lunch hour. I think that is so awesome because it means it's an every person's sport, isn't it? I think that's great. And it doesn't mean that we're not serious about it or that we don't want it to be accurate. Of course we do. But my goodness, you know me, my mantra, it should be fun. Okay, so we're going to have fun. And finally, it sounds like Christine's been having fun. Okay, so Christine wrote in, she says, I just retired. And guess what is first on my list of things I want to do? I jumped in with both feet listening to your premium podcast and realized a few times that I am the cookie cutter researcher, but no more. You are the captain of my ship now. Thank you. After binging on your podcast the last 2 weeks, the first bit of advice I took was changing the way I search on newspapers.com. My family's everyday life's treasures were buried in the pages of the local news. And you made me take a second look after I dismissed the possibility of ever reading about them. Thank you so much for your dedicated work on behalf of all the genealogists. My premium subscription will never, she says in capital letters, run out. When a family member says, I don't know what to get you, I'm prepared to solve the dilemma. Warm regards, a listener for life. I love it because we're going to be doing this for life, correct? Our whole lives? I don't know. It's not a job for me. It's a passion. If it were a job, I'd be retired. My goodness. No, I love doing this. And I'm so glad that you're enjoying being a premium member. I mean, that's where we really, take it to the next level. So I'm so thrilled that you're enjoying that. And it's interesting. You mentioned the newspapers. I just did an article. In fact, I'm going to head over to the website. So I put this out in the newsletter, I think it was last week. I wrote it originally in 2015, A Shocking Family Secret and 3 Powerful Newspaper Search Tips. And I went back and took another look at it. Obviously, a lot changes in, 4 years. So anyway, I've doubled or tripled the size of this article and added a whole lot more strategies and information. And I've kind of told you a little bit more about the backstory of this. So I had a research question about my husband's great-grandmother. And in this, I have 3 strategies that I think every single researcher should be using. You're going to get so much more out of newspapers if you do this. In fact, in this example, I talked about how I found the one newspaper article I was looking for, the one that really answered the questions that I had. But in examining it closely, I realized this was the tip of the iceberg. If you take these strategies and comb through this article, I ended up, I think, going from one article to about 16. 16 different mentions in the newspapers. And I tell you, they're out there. Even when your people are not famous, these were not famous people. The newspaper had a lot of different reasons for publishing information about families and neighborhoods and communities. And I found so much. So I was really excited to share it with you all. I hope you will go over and check this out. It's called 3 Powerful Newspaper Research Tips. All right. Well, coming up next, we've been talking about dabbling and kind of being a part-time researcher. That's all cool. Christine was worried about being a cookie cutter researcher. And I think that's probably what we're going to talk about next, in that the cookie cutter mode is just kind of a little one size fits all. Just follow the leads of whatever genealogy website you're on and just follow that path and you kind of stamp out your family tree. But of course, that's not research, because the website can't really lead you or create a really solid research plan for you so that you can get accurate information. That we need to do ourselves. And that means kind of going from the cookie cutter that Christine mentioned, of course, she's not that anymore, and taking it to a less shallow and a deeper type of research. And that's what's coming up next. As I travel the world talking about genealogy, folks are always stopping me and asking for my advice on organizing and securing their family history research. And my standard answer is plant your family tree in your own backyard and share branches online. Planting your tree in your own backyard, it means keeping one master family tree in a software file right there on your own computer. That gives you ownership, control of privacy and security, and one central place to organize everything that you learn about your family. And of course, my software of choice and the one that I use is Roots Magic. I find that its tree building tools are second to none. And with Roots Magic Web Hints, you can see what record hints are available on Family Search, Find My Past, and My Heritage. And now you have the ability to synchronize your Roots Magic database with your Ancestry tree and get those Ancestry.com web hints right there inside of Roots Magic. These are features that are really critical and they're exclusive to Roots Magic. So plant your tree today in Roots Magic and watch it grow. Get started at rootsmagic.com. Elissa Scalise Powell, who's a certified genealogist, is co-director of the Genealogical Research Institute of Pittsburgh, which is known as GRIP. And she's the past president of the Board of Certification of Genealogists. And in 2017, she won the Association of Professional Genealogists Professional Achievement Award. I have invited her to join me today for a conversation about the problems that we can run into in our genealogy research, and particularly the ones that kind of come out of the issue of not going quite deep enough. Welcome to the show, Elissa.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. Gosh, we see each other coming and going all around the country as we're speaking. And it finally hit me. I have got to get her on the show because I know you're a sought-after speaker, and we're both passionate about genealogy. And I think this is a really important topic. This whole idea of, have we gone deep enough and far enough to be confident in the conclusions that we're drawing in our research? I know I get that kind of question in classes, from emails from our listeners, and I imagine you do too, don't you?
Absolutely. Used to be that we believed that if you had 3 pieces of evidence that would point to the same thing, that was enough. Now the feeling is you really need to just cover all your bases, because you never know where that landmine is going to be that will blow up your theory. 3 pieces of information can be incorrectly pointing at the wrong answer. So yes, being a little bit more broad in research is very beneficial.
Well, gosh, these days with, of course, genetic genealogy and DNA testing, there's some bombs out there, some things that are blowing up in people's faces when they feel like that they've really done their homework and they go, it's a different whole branch. So before we jump into all of that, let's take a step back, because when you're talking about these pieces of evidence that we need, this really fits into the whole genealogical proof standard. And I'd love to have you just give everybody that elevator pitch on what this is and why it's so important.
Well, it's a proof standard to assist you in being more confident in what you consider proof. What I tell my audiences is proof is in the mind of the beholder. It is not the sheet of paper. It is not the artifact or the document. It is the credence that we give to that sheet of paper. Oh, it's an official sheet of paper, so it must be correct. Well, no, it could have typos and transcription errors and et cetera. So what the GPS, or Genealogical Proof Standard, does is tries to codify a little bit and show people what is involved in being confident in your answer. And one of those is the reasonably exhaustive research. It's not just searching, it is research. And it emphasizes original records because, as we know, anything that's derived from original record has transcription errors or errors of omission or commission. Things can be changed. Source citations are part of the GPS, and the audience might say, well, I don't need to cite my sources, or this is just for family. Well, doesn't your family deserve the best that you can do? And citing where you got this information not only saves you time and trouble later, and that's one of the things that we will discuss as far as your shallow search, because you want to go back and look at that source again when you come up with the conflicting evidence. Not if, but when you come up with the conflicting evidence, you will want to go back and look at the what you had saw before. And so that's part of it. It also shows your reader how deep you did go. If I just say I got a death date from a book, and the audience will know that, okay, it must be a book on tombstone readings or whatever. If I say I got it from the actual stone, that has a different value. That has a different credibility because you're getting it from the original thing. Not that it's correct either, even though it's written in stone. It could be wrong also. So, but saying exactly where you got this information helps your reader understand that exhaustive research that you have done. And then correlation and analysis. No one document stands alone. It could be the wrong one. And you won't know that until you've done a wide breadth of evidence that points to whatever. And you analyze, you correlate, you bring it all together. Our ancestors didn't live in a vacuum, and they didn't create records singularly in a vacuum. It's the summation of their lives that we're trying to really analyze and remember and pick apart. And then if there is, or when there is conflicting evidence, we need to resolve that. We need to give the reader a plausible explanation for that conflict. Oh, she lied to get married because her parents didn't approve and they would never have signed the consent because she was underage. So that's a conflict because it's showing that she's 21 years old, but she really wasn't. And then this is all well and good, but it's nothing until you write it down. So the fifth part of the GPS is to write it down. then you can hand that written, analyzed, source-cited conclusion to your reader or your audience or your cousin and say, hey, this is what I think proves the point. And they can read that then. And we also have to be receptive to feedback that says, oh, but I have the family Bible that says this. And you go, oh, well, great. Let us collaborate on that, and I will change my conclusion. So this is a ongoing, living type of way of doing research that writes down your conclusions. And if you do nothing but do this and leave this for the legacy for future generations, then they will be able to carry the family history research further.
Oh, absolutely. And you've really laid out beautifully these 5 GPS components. There's the reasonably exhaustive research, the complete and accurate citation of sources, of course, that processing of analysis and correlation, the testing of what we've found, the resolution of the conflicts, and that written conclusion. And it's interesting, of course, the last 4, and we talked about the first one being reasonably exhaustive research, the other 4 oftentimes will bring you back to more research, won't it? It really helps you work the process until you get that conclusion that you feel good about. So it's these other pieces that really help us know whether we have gone maybe a little shallow or we need to go deeper.
Absolutely. Writing is the way our brain can communicate on paper or screen. And we're talking to ourselves really in the beginning, and that drives the research. It really does.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, particularly if they came to genealogy, in the last 5 or 10 years, everything's on websites, they're building their tree on a website, and they haven't thought about this piece of, okay, even if I'm doing a lot of online research, maybe I haven't even gotten to the library and archives yet, or maybe I have, but we're doing so much on equipment that we're not necessarily thinking about the writing piece. And it's so critical, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. 20, 30 years ago when I was a baby genealogist, the idea was that was in the BC era, before computers. And you did that. You went and researched because I will eventually write it down. And that sometimes prevails in our thought pattern. Now the thought is to write as you go, to write it up as you go. Because if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, what is your family legacy? Even well-researched and documented trees on the internet are not going to be your family legacy. What happens if those websites go down or something happens to them? My goal, my personal goal is and always has been the book. I want to do the book that's going to last 200 years, that my descendants who are not even born yet will pick up and be able to read and know what sources were available, because not everything's going to be sustainable. So that's just a way to convey all this hard work and all this knowledge of our family history, all this desire to how to pass it on, is by writing up what it is you know right now. And as I said, it drives the research, because you'll come up with questions. You'll say, gee, I wonder what happened to Uncle Joe. And, so then you put that a little bit of aside. The way I like to write it, Lisa, is to start writing the narrative. And then when I come up with these bright, shiny objects, that say, oh, what happened to Uncle Joe? I put those in square brackets in red type, that question. And then I continue on with my story so it doesn't interrupt my flow.
Love that.
But I can put that there so that I can go back, easily see it in red type, and square brackets means note to self. So that's one way to do the narrative. And sometimes maybe the next generation will have to answer those questions. But that's one way, just to continue the writing and don't get sidetracked by the bright, shiny objects.
Oh, I love that. I like the idea of including them in the brackets in the narrative. I oftentimes tell my students, I use Evernote, and I will have a tag that is actually called BSO, bright, shiny object. And every time I find one, I can write it up in a note, tag it, and I know that when I've got some extra time, I can sit down and just work through those. But I kind of like it being in the narrative too. Stay tuned for more on preventing shallow genealogical research with Elissa Scalise Powell right after this. Our sponsor for this episode is MyHeritage. They have over 70 million members worldwide. Now, if you're serious about making connections in the country where your ancestors once lived, hands down, MyHeritage is the place that you want to be. I uploaded my family tree hoping for a breakthrough in my German family line, and that breakthrough happened really quickly. I received a message from a distant cousin in Germany, and that was my first international cousin contact. And MyHeritage has a unique and powerful search system. It's called Record Matches. Now, this constantly culls over 8 billion historical records for your family. It's also the only family history interface out there using semantic analysis to search newspaper articles, books, and other free text documents. So find out what MyHeritage can do to help you grow your family tree. Visit myheritage.com. It's free to get started, so there's really no reason to wait, and there are billions of reasons to try it out. Visit myheritage.com. You know, I just got an email, in fact, this morning. One of my listeners said, gosh, I'm putting so much effort into this. And I'd written an article about going deeper into your research. And she said, I'm really doing that. She says, but I don't believe that anybody will take this back up again until well after I'm gone. And I think that's actually more common than we think. A lot of times our kids are not interested in taking it up. They see we're doing it. Why bother doing what mom's doing or dad's doing? And we have to kind of plan ahead. And one of the ways we do that, like you said, is to write it up, put those questions right in there, because we can just work assuming that it may not be till after we're gone that somebody else can pick this back up, but at least they can pick it back up. Let's talk a little bit about low-hanging fruit because that's a place that people often go first. And talk a little bit about what that is and maybe why that's a little bit of a dangerous way to go about things.
Well, as baby genealogists, and we've all been there, as we try to grab what is easy and quick. So that's what is typically called low-hanging fruit. It's very straightforward. Yeah, it's easy to understand. It's easily accessible. You can do it on your lunch hour, maybe through a website or something. And you believe that the documents state the facts and that they are true. And then you start coming up with that conflicting evidence, and maybe it doesn't answer the questions, or that's when you realize you need to go deeper. And so maybe education comes into play here. You say, gee, I wonder how I can learn about this record group. I was on a Facebook group somewhere, and one of the posts was saying, and I'm not criticizing the person at all. They were just a baby genealogist. And they said, this has probably been asked before, but where can I find the 1890 census for this city? And it had to be explained to him about
to break the bad news, right?
Right. But he didn't know because, and yes, we would all love that one to be found again. But no, it was burned. So when you come to the end of the low-hanging fruit, you might think you have a brick wall. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because a brick wall is usually self-made, and it usually comes at the end of our knowledge.
Yes.
So it's just a signpost that says, go get more knowledge or go get help on this particular problem. It's not really unsolvable, perhaps. There are some that are, but so far I haven't given up hope. I don't know about your research, but
No, I agree. I think it's actually an opportunity, but like you said, it's an opportunity in a different direction. It could be, I need to get offline. I need to educate myself. There's something that I'm missing, but it doesn't mean it's not out there.
Right. And so when we start to learn about further sources, then we can break through that so-called brick wall. And the research is not straightforward, or you might not know the existence of a record that would answer the question, or it's not easily accessible. It exists, but the archive hours are only 1 hour a month, or it's in a foreign language, or it's time-consuming. What do you mean there's no index? Or we need to study it and analyze it, and, some people skip deed work, and I think that is a gold mine of information. If you truly understand what a deed is saying, it's not just, oh, they lived on this property and they bought it and they sold it, but it can get into the anomalies of relationships and how it was acquired. Was he a soldier? Was it military land? You can get a lot more out of that deed research if you just totally understand it and really dive in.
Now, that's a great example because somebody may have come across what they think is a brick wall. Really, deeds are the place to go. And they feel like, oh my gosh, I've not even dipped my baby toe in this. Where do I begin? What do you do, and what do you suggest for folks when they're faced with that whole new area and branch of research and how to get started?
Well, again, education. That's my middle name. Mm-hmm. And I believe the National Genealogical Society has online courses that members can utilize, and then there's ones for purchase. There's your wonderful podcasts and articles. What is often overlooked is Family Search has a Learn Center, Learn. Up in the right-hand corner, you can click on that, and they have over 500 videos that are free and open to the public. I have a few in there if you wanted to look for me or look for cemetery readings or whatever.
Oh, great.
But those are meant to be educational there. And I even have one there that's on how to develop your own education plan. So just like a research plan, you need an education plan. It takes you from where you are to where you're going. And so look on that Family Search Learn Center for that video there.
And I love the wiki, the Family Search wiki. And that's a nice place to start to just kind of read the page devoted to, let's say, deeds or records in a certain county or whatever the issue is, and just kind of get a really quick overview. And so often they also will link to lots of terrific resources to really help you get up to speed.
Absolutely. And even as a very experienced person, you always are a novice in a certain area.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, I think, is the DNA craze now, is even the baby genealogists all the way to the very experienced and professionals. We are all baby genetic genealogists. So that's why we all have to learn how to utilize this new tool as part of our evidential support of our family trees.
I agree, too. And, I get this question. I'm interested in your opinion on this as well. DNA is so hot, and a lot of people are throwing a whole bunch of time at working on DNA and trying to understand it and everything. Talk a little bit about where you think DNA fits in this. And if you had a choice, if you only had an hour to sit down and work an issue, would you be doing it through DNA or would you be turning to other sources? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, as to your last question, it depends. Mm-hmm. It depends on the question as to whether DNA is appropriate. It's just another piece of evidence. Right. Just like census is a piece of evidence, or deeds, or a probate, or anything else that we use, county histories, maps. So it's another piece of evidence, and whether or not it's appropriate, if I'm researching 1600s New England, census is not an appropriate tool. And even DNA, autosomal DNA is not an appropriate tool, although Y-DNA might be if you're going up the paternal line. So there's all these rules that we need to learn. I will say that I spent last week in class in an advanced DNA class, and I had a wonderful time working on my own problems for once, as well as when I came out, I was able to connect with a cousin, and they said, oh, I see no Powells in our family tree. And I said, well, that's because you have the wrong people in your family tree.
Ouch.
And I was able to research it through traditional records, and then with the kind of seal of the DNA connection. I mean, if they weren't connected to it's actually my husband's Powells, that connection would never have even come up at the level that we were showing. Mm-hmm. So I said, you got to be related somehow. And it turns out that it was Charlie Powell's wife, Margaret Galvin, that they were related to her sister. So they weren't really Powells because this would have been an in-law situation, but they were Galvins. And that was the common line then. So that's why they didn't see it, and then they had the wrong wife for their ancestor. And so I'm so happy through that class to be able to help them realize that somebody had just grabbed the wrong records and assigned the wrong wife to the husband.
And that's a great example of how, it's one of the records and it all works together. It's nothing, no record is in a vacuum either. It all works together. Let's talk a little bit about the pitfalls of shallow research, if you will. Talk a little bit about the problems and the corners it kind of backs us into.
Well, we all have the family stories that are carried down from generation to generation, and not until something comes up and is in conflict do we really examine, how is it that I know this, and why is it that we all believe it? So examining those stories, maybe that mistake in that tree I was just talking about was made a decade ago. I don't know. But the first reaction when I said, hey, you got the wrong wife was, no, we don't. So those kind of family stories have been passed down, and we tend to believe them over time. As I mentioned, official documents are not always correct. One of my favorite standards in the book Genealogy Standards is about, was there a reason to lie? That's part of the analysis. If there was a reason to lie by the original giver of the information, then we should examine that and be aware of that, because even though they're telling the official about their marriage date or their age on the marriage license, that might not be as believable. Or I've even had death records where the name of the deceased was wrong because of transcription error or something like that.
Right.
And one of the biggest things about doing too shallow research, you may say, I've done all the county histories, I've done all the books, I've done all these transcribed and abstracted information. But not until you go seek out the original and review it do you really know that it was transcribed correctly, that it was understood correctly. I remember, I think it was Germans to America, that set of volumes. Mm-hmm. Or it might have been some other passenger. I'm not going to blame it on them. But it was some kind of book like that where I was reading the preface, and the editor very carefully goes through and says, I don't know why they spelled everything with an FF, but
goodness.
But I preserved that spelling throughout the transcription. And that is a basic misunderstanding of the long S and the handwriting of the time. So, yes.
And sorry, I said yes over you, but say that again, because those were S's, not F's, like Frank.
Right.
Exactly.
It was the long S, they call it, like Sam, not the F like in Frank. Yes. So understanding that handwriting is very important, and then understanding the historical context. Calling someone a relic means that they were usually a widow, that she was a relic of her husband or a remainder because of the way the social norms connected husband and wife together as one. She would be a relic. Or then there's the consort of. Mm-hmm. So if she was the consort of her husband, then no, she wasn't doing anything bad. She was just his wife.
And those are good examples of when you are reading along and you see something that you kind of tilt your head and go, huh? It's so simple to just kind of keep going. But that's a really great little signpost that says, stop, go do a quick research. In that time frame, in that place, what does that really mean? And we could certainly learn a whole lot more if we just take a look. That's one of those opportunities to take that time to go find out exactly what it meant in that time period, in its context.
Right, because you might be going down the wrong path if you don't understand it. Yes. And that, jumping to premature conclusions is just a brick wall right there. I will tell a story on myself when I was not a baby genealogist, but maybe a middle-aged genealogist, that I had for 15 years assigned a brother to our Louisa Powell. And then I decided to do the DNA, and I traced the supposed brothers' family down, and I chased him out to Kansas, and I actually called a descendant of his. And she says, oh, yeah, no problem. I'll get my brothers to test, DNA. And then we got to talking, and she says, oh, how about their father, William? And I said, no, the father was Stephen. Come to realize, and it really hit me like a brick, that he was not a brother. I mean, I just had the wrong assumption.
Right.
So what do? I go back and I look at all the evidence that I had gathered to help me with that erroneous conclusion, and I had pinned it on one document. And it was a marriage document where he named his parents as William and Mary Powell, and her parents were William and Mary Powell. They were 2 years apart in age. I made them brother and sister. Now, what's the chances of two William and Mary Powells being in the same town in West Virginia? Well, obviously, there's a big
possible.
chance. Yeah, that's absolutely.
And there's a great reason to have your sources, right? To have them cited, to be able to go back and read your source citation and go right to where you got that information.
Absolutely. And then I was able to research and do a timeline and say, oh, here's where I went wrong. And so there's these tools out there that also help us to do the analysis. So, yeah, jumping to conclusions is don't depend on one document. Don't do what I did.
No, but that's a great example. It happens to all of us.
And sometimes we just disregard evidence. We say, oh, they would never walk 5 miles to church just because we wouldn't walk 5 miles to church. Or we disregard something else that's poking its head up because we just are dismissive, or we're using presentism, which means, we're applying the present to the customs of the past, or something else where we say, oh, that evidence doesn't meet my conclusion, so I'm just going to leave it alone. Don't do that either, because that's a landmine. We just don't want to do that.
That's a great point. And I think it can be tempting to do when you feel like everything else falls together and that one thing, that must be the wrong thing, but not necessarily. Just like you said, it's. I love your signpost. I have to think about that. The signposts that are out there that are waving at us to look once again. Gosh, and these are all great examples of why it's so worthwhile. So I know that you have a website. Tell folks where they can find you, and anything else as far as closing ideas on how they can move beyond this shallow research into something a little more in-depth.
Well, my website is powellgenealogy.com. Don't look at it too closely because I'm going to revamp it this year yet. And so you can find me through that, powellgenealogy.com. And then as far as where to go to learn more, start with your local societies. Your local societies are looking for members who want to learn more about genealogy. They might have programming that might be of interest, and even though that program doesn't sound interesting, go anyway. Connect with your local genealogists. Connect with others in the area. I am not from the area I live in. My ancestors were not here, but I have gone to my local society every month for 30 years, and I've always learned something. The next step then is conferences. And I'm talking about in-person experiences because we spend so much time in isolation. And that's where you and I keep meeting, is at conferences. And that's where you can really talk to people and get those nuggets. You'd never know who's going to say what over waiting in line for lunch, or, in a lecture that you're stimulated. You got these brick wall problems in the back of your mind, and they said something that really sparks that. And you may know all this knowledge, but not until someone says it maybe slightly differently or reminds you about a certain record group that you can apply it to that brick wall problem in the back of your mind that we all carry around with us. So those are kinds of things I would look for. Of course, the online learning is obvious. Just Google whatever you want, but I would encourage that in-person learning. It's not just about the learning. It is about the interpersonal relationships and people who trigger things in you or mention a project. I know I've gotten ideas for projects that I've worked on from these interactions, because my mantra, one of them is, when someone says, why don't they have X? Well, they is us who haven't done it yet. So if there's if a record group doesn't have an index, you could help. You can make that index. You can help Family Search do indexing. You can help the world become a better genealogical place if you contribute as well. And maybe that's where your local society comes in. I know people say, well, I don't have time. But it also is very beneficial to do these kinds of projects. It's a learning thing. How do you dive deep into a record group? Well, dive in, transcribe, abstract, index, do something, set of records for your area of research, and you will find your ancestors. If they're there, you will find them in that deep dive, and it'll benefit others as well.
Exactly. It's a way to really make a difference. And, after all, our family tree, it's about people. And it makes sense that genealogy is about people. There's something very, very special that happens when we all get together and really say it out loud, too. Don't you think? There's something about processing, particularly problems. When you talk about them out loud, they can crystallize and people can chime in, and it's a very special experience indeed. This has been special. Elissa, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm so glad we finally got you here on the show.
I'm very happy to have been invited, Lisa, and I hope that your audience can take away a few tidbits here and put them into practice.
Absolutely. Thanks again. I'll see you on the road.
Thank you. You too.
Well, I'm here at the Genealogy Show. We're in Birmingham, England. This is a first time for this event, but not a first time to meet many of the people in the genealogy community. And I'm so happy to have here with me today is Lorna Moloney, and she has Trace Your Irish Roots. It's a wonderful website and service in terms of Irish research. I know many of you listening have Irish ancestors, and so you can find Lorna at traceyourishroots.com. Welcome to the show, Lorna.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be on this. I'm delighted.
Well, how has the conference been for you so far? Again, this is the first time for this event, but not the first time for Birmingham. How has it been for you?
It's great to see it back in Birmingham again. I was devastated when it wasn't running there last year, so I'm thrilled with the Genealogy Show that they've decided to pick up the gap that's there for this type of event, and that we're all together and able to network and meet each other and so on, and put a name to the faces, because often it's about meeting and reading and seeing people's work all during the course over the years, but actually getting to press the flesh, as they say. We have that expression in Ireland, and be able to speak to people and get to know people as well.
Yeah. Now, when we talk Irish research, we're covering a lot of ground. Tell the folks a little bit about what you specialize in.
I'll tell you, I specialise in getting as much information free of charge out there, because there's such a lot of it in Ireland once you know how to do it. And I concentrate on letting people know about the 4 pillars of Irish genealogy research, which are free of charge, and that's the 1901 and 1911 census, Griffith's valuation, and the tithe allotments. The tithe allotments and Griffith's valuation are census substitutes. The 1901 is a census that's freely available online. 1911, freely available online. And within these 4 pillars, you can pretty much navigate your way around the thorny world of Irish genealogy without ending up pulling bits of your hair out on top of your head and scratching yourself to pieces with frustration and annoyance. Because a lot of people come to me and they say, I just can't make any head nor tail of it. And you're going, this is fine. This is what you do. These are your 4 pillars. But what's great about it is you're giving people quality sites to be able to bring back to you information that you can verify. Mm-hmm. Because as you know, in Ireland, it's one thing to have a Daniel Murphy from Cork, but it's another thing to be able to point yourself in the right townland and the right location. And that's what the 4 pillars do.
And that's really so critical. It's that townland.
Yes.
And when somebody, let's say in the US or Australia or Canada, they feel like they have finally found that document in their current location that shows them where this Irish ancestor may have came from, and they have the name of a townland. What are some of the first things that you encourage people to do so they'll be successful?
I encourage people to go through the wonderful graveyard records there's a great veneration of the dead in Ireland. So the graveyard projects have been very well supported by local volunteers who have transcribed and videotaped and put pictures up of the gravestones. And an awful lot of things in America, when they're buried in America, they're actually using the townland on the headstone.
So if we haven't seen that, if we haven't visited that gravesite or found it, a photograph of it, we need to really go check that out.
Maybe you'll never be able to come to Ireland. Not everybody can.
Right.
I want information to be able to be accessible there if you can never get to Ireland, because I believe that's your right to be able to touch in to your roots in the past and so on. So you'll be able to match your little graveyard with your townlands, because they take great pride in being able to differentiate themselves. Sure. Because you're Daniel Murphy from Gurtavulla, you don't want to be Daniel Murphy from Thome. You know, this kind of thing. You want your lineage to be intact.
Now these, you were talking about photographs and grave data. This is on a unique site because we tend to think about billion graves.
There's historic graves. Find a grave. You use them all. You don't just stick to one.
Yes.
You use them all and you cross-reference. Now, historic graves, John Tierney has run training courses all over the country and he's taught people how to do this type of work. He's excellent in historic graves and they're wonderfully put together. You cannot go wrong there.
Excellent.
And you'll end up like me, not taking your own advice and searching for people in England that came back to Ireland and were buried in Ireland. And if I had taken my own advice, I wouldn't have wasted hours and hours and hours of valuable time.
Exactly.
Because I'd have followed my own advice of going that pattern. Your 4 pillars, your historic graves, then go to the parish registers. Then you're able, then you know enough to be able to look for the right result of what you're finding.
There are many, I've talked to many people, and I've got a case in my own family tree where I know the county, and I know the name, I know who she married, I think I even know her parents' names, but I don't have a townland. And so far, no document has said that.
Because you have the network of names, you have everything.
Okay.
Marriages get replicated in Ireland. Marriage is not a love affair, I'm afraid, in Ireland. It's a maid matches. We're up to early 20th century. Maid matches are where they're arranging marriages to keep land. The tithe allotment is your best document. The tithe allotment will give you the grouping of the surnames that are together in that. Griffith's valuation, not so, because they're not necessarily next door to each other. The census, yes, because they're next door to each other. They're in a line. So Griffiths is by valuation. So it's not because you see a name next to each other in Griffith's valuation or the primary valuation, which is freely available online at Ask About Ireland. They're not next door neighbours. So what you need to do is use your tithe allotments, search by place through the National Archives of Ireland, and then see, is that pattern of names there that you've got, the great grandparents, is a sequence of names there?
Yes.
Then you're narrowing down your area of what you've got.
And as key as that is to Irish research, you're really describing something that I think, particularly those who are new to genealogy, don't really have on their radar yet, which is in all genealogy, it's the interconnectedness of the records, the data. To look at just one document and think, there is my answer, you really don't have it yet. You need to be able to cross-reference and verify.
We've all gone down the rabbit holes. We've all found the same person and they've looked almost identical. And we've all cried bitter tears when we have had to go, oh, it isn't that person.
Exactly.
And been very despondent and threatened to give up genealogy forever and ever. But there's no point. You have to dry your tears.
Yes.
Put your smile back on and just start again and go, okay, what do I need to remember? 3 words, the same words. Verify, verify, verify.
Yep.
You ain't got no sources for it. You ain't got nothing.
That's right.
So what you've got is your group of names. You also have some little tips that perhaps aren't on digital, that you end up with I buy the paper tablecloths and I roll them out and I sit there with the client and we can roll up that and bring it under our arm where we go and we can add to it and we can photograph it now.
Oh. And are you just writing on it? Yes.
And we photograph on it and we can roll it up. And this works in war-torn areas too, because I used to work as a conservationist where we didn't have things that worked. And that works.
And it works. And
so when it works, it works. And now it's even better because you can digitize it. You can use scanners on your phone, and you're not stuck with losing the piece of paper.
Exactly. Now, I know, let me switch gears because I want to let people know about what you're doing in Ireland in terms of your radio show, reaching people. You're out there every day inspiring people to go ahead and take the plunge and get involved. Tell us about what you've been doing.
I live in a very rural part of County Clare, and I do the radio show above in Kilkee, which really helps educational disadvantage. But that's a very small part of my life because I'm down in University College Cork, where I have a position part-time. And I work on genealogy remits, but I work as a springboard coordinator, which is getting graduates back into the workplace and getting people reskilled and so on, because we had a terrible recession there a few years ago, and doing all that type of work as well. But what I want most of all is people not to feel disconnected from their past because of financial reasons. I don't believe that that's good. I believe people have the right to research their past, but do it in the best quality way possible. So academics should be more reaching out to people, not expecting people to come to them and be able to do all this type of work. And I'm also committed to the rural, western, wild Atlantic way and the outreach of that, and making sure that all the people who left and had to leave 150 to 200 years ago are remembered and linked back to their rightful places all the way down along the western coast.
That's exciting work. It's wonderful to get a chance to talk with you here in person. And, of course, I want to encourage everybody to stay in touch with Lorna, because you can find her at traceyourrootsirish.com, and tell them if they're now in Ireland. I don't know if your radio show reaches beyond that.
Yes, it does.
Tell them how they can hear you, too.
Well, you can podcast. It's podcast out through Mixcloud, but I also put the full listing on. We just celebrated 5 years.
Excellent.
So I put it on SlideShare there the other day. So I have the full listing of 5 years. You won't get out into the sun at all this summer because all you'll be doing is listening and doing whatever. But I've got the best of the best on it, and they're giving help and giving assistance, and nothing has changed. There's nothing changed in how the sources are there. So this will be a great help if you want to know what our show last week was illnesses in Ireland. We have done mental health in Ireland, of all these things. We have covered some difficult themes because we've had suicide and how do you deal with the difficult deaths? How do you deal with the difficult facts? Family history can be a very sad business.
Yes.
How do we navigate and reconcile those spaces? And people are doing some exciting work with adoption and all those kind of things at the moment. So we're covering that. We're on the cutting edge of that.
Wonderful. Well, wonderful to see you, and we'll be listening to you as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Do you have Irish roots? Then Irish Roots magazine is the perfect publication for you. Irish Roots magazine is dedicated entirely to Irish ancestral research and has been proudly helping readers worldwide to trace and embrace their Irish ancestors since it was first published in 1992. Irish Roots magazine is a quarterly publication filled with lots of really helpful articles on how to research your ancestors. Keep up with all the latest Irish genealogical record releases and lots of news from the world of Irish genealogy. Digital subscriptions start from less than $15. Incredible value for a yearly subscription, or just $42 for a print subscription, including postage worldwide. Check out Irish Roots magazine's website at irishrootsmagazine.com for further details. That's irishrootsmagazine.com.
Thank you for joining me here on Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 232. I host my podcast on a company called Libsyn, and they have a survey that they've asked us to have you guys do just to kind of get a sense of who's listening. And this helps me as a podcaster because it helps me really fine-tune my topics and what I'm talking about, just kind of gives us a sense of who the audience is. So if you wouldn't mind taking that for me, my friend, that would be wonderful. So on the show notes page for this episode 232, at the bottom you'll find a link, or maybe I'll put it at the top because I want you to take it. So maybe I'll put it at the top. It says podcast survey. And if you're not driving and you want to write this down, you can also go to survey.libsyn, libsyn.com/genealogy gems podcast. I will have that link in the show notes. And I think it's just probably 1 minute to take the survey. But it will help us a lot in crafting the show and making sure that we're getting to you what you need. And before I let you go, we have announced that we are going to be doing Genealogy Roots again in Sandy, Utah this October of 2019. We did this for the first time last year. We had hundreds of genealogists who came and had a fabulous time with us for 2 full days. I know I had a fabulous time with all of you. This year, we are going to be doing Genealogy Roots on October 10th and 11th, 2019. Now, this is a 2-day genealogy training event is kind of what I'm calling it. It's not really a conference. We're not conferencing. We're getting together. We're going to have fun. We're going to learn. We're going to interact. And we're going to have a very special guest, Jeff Rasmussen from Family Tree Webinars. Day number 1 is going to be structured so that it's ideal if you're new to genealogy. You'll fit right in, but also if you're a seasoned genealogist, it's going to be a wonderful skill brush up, if you will. And I know many of you have told me that when you listen to old podcast episodes, you feel like, oh my gosh, I thought I knew that, and I realize I'm not doing that. So it's a great brush up, making sure that all your skills are really fine tuned. And then on day 2, we're all going to move on together into intermediate and advanced topics. This is a brand new program, full color spiral bound book that not just a syllabus on a flash drive, you're going to get a workbook that you can take home and also follow along with us and really use it to apply what you're learning to your own family history research. It's appropriate for all ages, all skill levels now. And it's once again going to be held at the Senior Expo, which is a huge kind of a home show type of an event geared to seniors, although Genealogy Roots, of course, is open to all ages. 25 minutes south of Salt Lake City and about the same distance north of Provo, which situates it perfectly between the Family History Library in Salt Lake and the BYU Family History Library in Provo. If you haven't been there, that's also a wonderful, wonderful genealogical resource. Now through September 15th, we have early bird pricing. So each day pass, and you can do a single day pass if you're just in the area for 1 day. It's $49 for 1 day, but you get the 2-day pass, which is normally $69 for the 1-day pass price. So 2 days for $49. It's a wonderful deal. You'll get a bag when you arrive. It'll have your full color workbook in it. And it's all going to be held at the Mountain America Exposition Center in Sandy, Utah. So check it out, seniorexpo.org/genealogy roots. We've got tons of program information there. You'll know exactly what the classes are going to be. You'll see a video from last year and how much fun we had, more information about Jeff. And we've got links with frequently asked questions and also for those of you coming from out of town. There is travel information. We've got hotels that we're suggesting that are in the area that are excellent. So all the travel information that you need if you want to come from out of town. We'd love to have you join us. Again, it's Genealogy Roots, 2 days of innovative genealogy training. And that's October 10th and 11th, 2019. seniorexpo.org/genealogy roots. All right, well, until next time, thank you so much for listening, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.